Welcome to class with Filomena. Let's make some candy canes. So let's take a look at what's in your kit. So if you were able to pick up a kit at the library, your bag will probably look like this. And if you didn't get a kit or you're not from the area, don't worry, these supplies are pretty simple for you to get. So inside your kit, you have some floof. We're gonna stuff something. We need to stuff it with something. We're gonna stuff it with some floof. We have a piece of fabric. If we're going to be sewing something, we need to have some fabric to sew. We have a little instruction card. We have some paper, some thick paper, so we can make a template. We have a paintbrush because we are painting. We have a marker, and you may have a different color. You have a couple of treats in here, which I won't spoil the surprise. We have some thread, and your colors may be different. This is important. Are you paying attention? You paying attention? This is important. So in this little packet here is a thread, is a needle so that you can sew with this thread. So there is a needle in here. I tried to make it as safe as possible. So do be careful. What else do we have in here? We have some paint, and again, your colors may be different. So that is what's in your kit. And again, if you didn't get the kit from the library, that's fine. These supplies are pretty easy for you to find. That paint that's in there is just plain old acrylic paint. Easy peasy. Some additional things that you'll need are some fresh water to rinse your brush out in and maybe add a little bit to your paint. You'll need scissors. You could use a small pair of scissors, maybe a paper towel to wipe your brush on, and something that is okay to paint on. So if you look at my surface here, I've got my plastic here on my painting desk, so I know it's fine to get some paint on there. So those are the things that you'll need in addition to your kit. So here we go. So the first step is to make a pattern of your candy cane. And spoiler alert, there may be some candy canes in your kit. I did not specifically draw this out for each of you because I wanted to have you go through the practice of making your own patterns. Feel brave, make your own patterns. I'm excited to see how your candy cane looks. It doesn't need to look like mine, and it doesn't need to look like your buddies. It's going to look like your candy cane. So the first thing we're going to do is to make a pattern. So we can take one of our candy canes and put it on our paper. And then with the marker that's in your kit, you can trace around it, but trace around it leaving about a ½ inch margin on all the sides of your candy cane. So you don't want to trace it really small and tight like the candy cane. You want to use some space around. You want to leave some space around your candy cane, or just go for it without that and just draw it on your own. You can do this. I know that you can. So then after you have traced your candy cane, you're gonna take some scissors, and make sure you have scissors that's okay to cut paper with. Sometimes people have scissors that are only for fabric. You wanna make sure you have some scissors that it's okay to cut paper with. And here's a trick. I cut mine very carefully so that I would have essentially two patterns. I have the positive shape and the negative shape. See, this is the opposite of this. And I did that so I could actually trace this all at once, or move it around on my fabric to make sure it was going to fit. I might have to move my fabric into another orientation, might have to move things around a little bit. That's fine. But if I carefully cut this out, See, I just made a snip at the bottom and then I carefully cut it out so that I actually have two templates. I have sort of like a stencil, and then I have something that I could outline here. Okay? So if that doesn't work out for you, don't worry about it. If you get to this point, it's fine. You'll trace it once and turn it over and trace it again. But since I have my two parts here, I'm going to put them on, and I'm going to make them hang out so like they're talking to one another. And notice that I have one in this direction and one in that direction, okay? One in this direction and one in that direction. You want to make it look almost like they're talking to one another, or you could make it that they're back to back, something like this. But make sure they are in opposite directions. That way, when we get to the sewing part, we have a front side and a back side. Got it? Got it. And this is how I think you should trace this or mark this on your paper, so on your fabric. So you have a marker. Yours may be different color than mine. That's fine. Instead of doing a big, thick, chunky line all the way around, I'm going to suggest that you just make some dots all the way around. So I'm going to hold down my paper and I'm doing dot, dot, dot all the way around my template onto my fabric. Dot, 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 dot. It doesn't have to be perfect. Don't worry. So you can see there I've got one. And again, if you had not been able to get your stencil on this side to look like this, that's fine. You could just lay down this one, but turn it over. Make sure it's opposite, okay? Make sure it's opposite. So if that's what you've got going on, same thing. And I kind of line these up and you'll see why. So the top of the candy cane is here, the bottom is about there, and you'll see why a little later. These don't have to be big dots. You just need to have something that you can see. And here's another tip. You can make any shape you like. So if you wanted to do moons or stars, if you wanted to do a rabbit, a lot of you might know that bunnies are my thing. So there, I've got two sides of a candy cane. Super great. So our next step is going to be to paint this. So with the magic of video, we can swap this one out here. See, I've got one that I've already painted. Isn't she pretty? So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to paint our candy canes. I chose to use sort of a bright purpley blue. You could use any colors you like. In your kit, you'll have two different colors. Everyone's kit is a little bit different. But if you didn't get the kit or you're watching this at another time, any sort of acrylic paint will do. I did not add any fabric or textile medium to this, and that's just fine. We're not washing this or we're not wearing this, or it's not something that's going to get handled a lot. So it's okay if the acrylic paint is just as it is without any textile medium. And the fabric we're working on is canvas. It's actually from a drop cloth. So here's another tip. Buy big old drop cloths at the hardware store, and you can make all kinds of fun things with this. I ironed the ones in your kit, so you can iron it, you can sew it, you can paint it. It's really fun and exciting. So this is what we're going to be going for. I did one stripe, but you could do multiple stripes. You could do polka dots. You could fill the whole thing in. I was feeling sort of stripey. So that's what we're going to do on this one here. And I'm going to move my tin here so I can get to my surface that's okay to paint on. And I'm going to grab, I am using this bright purpley blue. It kind of matches my the look in my dining room. So that's why I chose that. I've got a little bit of water in my paintbrush. I'm just gonna dab it on a piece of paper towel because I don't want it to be too wet. I'm gonna dip my paintbrush into some paint, and you'll have your little containers. Just be careful if you have any pets around that you're not, or any little people, any little babies in your area. You don't want them getting messed up with the paint. So I'm gonna do those stripes again. So I'm taking my time, and notice how my hand is holding the fabric. I'm just letting my hands keep the fabric very still. And notice we didn't cut them out yet. We didn't cut them out yet because it is way, way easier to paint. It is way, way easier to paint on this big piece of fabric than on a small piece of fabric. So I'm gonna go around all the way, and I'm sort of making these all even. When I get to like the hook part of the candy cane, I am skipping a space and then painting some more. So I'm gonna paint all of this one, and then I'm gonna come over here, and I've decided to go in opposite directions, but you could go in all the same direction. It's really up to you. I'm gonna paint all the way around until I get something that looks like this. Now, with your paintbrush, don't leave your paintbrush just out in the air. Take your paper towel, wipe it off right away, wipe it off, and then put it in your water, because you want to keep your paintbrush as healthy as possible. And cover up your paint. When you're done with your paint, please cover it up so that way you can use it more for other projects. So here we are. We have our candy canes. And I am going to cut just a little bit larger than the dots that I made. So I'm not going to cut on the dots. I'm going to cut a little bit larger. The dots are going to be where I actually sew. So I'm going to cut these out, and we'll come back and take a look. Okay, we're back. So I've cut out my 2 candy canes, and I've left some room around where the dots were. I did have to get a little tight right in there, but it's fine. We are going to sew these with wrong sides together. Typically, when you are doing a sewing project, you sew with right sides together, meaning pretty side to pretty side, but we are going to sew with wrong sides together because we want the edge of the fabric to show. We want it to be kind of frayed and rustic or bohemian, kind of modern and cool. So we are going to sew with wrong sides together. And now maybe you can see why I wanted you to make sure to flip your project when you were tracing, right? When we were tracing, we had to have them flipped. So either facing away from each other or facing each other. So now maybe you can see why, because now when we put them together, we have painted side and painted side on the outside. So we are going to arrange these to be stacked on top of each other, and I can see one of mine is a little bigger than the other. That's okay. I'm just gonna move it around a little bit, and now we are going to thread up our needle. So take your thread, and your kit may look a little bit different, and we're just gonna pull out, let's see, that's a little over 12 inches or so, and cut. And we are going to take our needle, and remember that needle was wrapped up in that piece of paper with the piece of tape on it. So you're going to take your needle, and you're going to thread one end of your cut embroidery floss through the needle. And you may have to wiggle it a little bit. Let's see. on, I know I can do it. There, nice and flat. Just take your time. It'll happen, I promise. There we go. Oh, I was so close. We'll get it. So then you just thread your needle. And then you're gonna put a knot in the other end. So how I make a knot is I usually wrap around 2 fingers and then tuck the thread under into the hole. Around 2 fingers, tuck it through the hole. And then you see I have this circle here. I'm just gonna go slow, go slow, go slow, so that I can get the circle towards the end of the thread. So I'm not taking up a lot of thread. So I can put my needle in here and pull, pull, pull. And then I have a knot. Nice. Have a little knot at the end. You also could have taken this end and brought it to the other end and made a big loop, a big circle of their thread, but I don't think that we need it. Okay, so we are going to essentially sew all the way around, but we need to leave an area open so that we can get the stuffing in. And I think the easiest place to leave open is right about here. So right about here is the easiest place. That way we can get stuffing into the hook of our candy cane. So we're gonna leave about 1.5 inches open. So I'm a left-handed person, so I usually sew with my needle in my left hand, but you may be a right-handed person and yours may look something like this. Both are going to be the same. Both are going to be the same. Maybe try switching it up. See if you can do it with both hands. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get this knot so that it's inside my candy cane. So I'm going through just one layer, just one layer. I'm not going through both right now. I am going through just one layer, and I'm aiming towards where I had those dots from when we traced our stencil. So I'm holding, pulling, pulling, pulling. And you can see you can't see the knot in the back here because I've got it in between my layers, okay? So now I'm gonna go all the way around and I'm gonna end right about here. I'm gonna end right about here. I'm not gonna sew this part up just yet because remember, we have to stuff it, right? So this is how I like to do this. It's called a stab stitch. So you are stabbing the fabric. I'm going about 1/4 inch away from where I came up, and I'm leaving about 1/4 inch of the edge because I liked that frayed look. I like it to look sort of frayed. So I go down into the fabric and I pull very gently. And then I'm going to stab very close to where I was. Very close to where I was. And I'm going to pull up again and make sure I've come all the way through. Looking good. Gonna go. And now I'm going through both layers of my candy cane. I'm going through both layers, so the front layer and the back layer. And pull. And then up and down. And you may get into the paint a little bit. So your paint must be very dry at this point. It must be very dry. So maybe you've painted it and then went and had a snack or something. And then you come back. I used a blow dryer, in fact, to dry this paint. So I'm going up and down. We're just going to stab stitch. And small stitches are good. You don't need any big honking stitches right here. And you can always fix up later. Like I noticed I came a little close to the edge over here, and that's fine. I can always come back later and add some more stitches. So here's a bonus for the stab stitch. You can do what's called a rocking stitch. So same thing. I'm in the back right now, so I'm coming up very close to that last stitch. And I'm going to rock my needle down. So I'm going down, making sure I get both sides of my candy cane. And instead of pulling all the way through, I'm going to manipulate the fabric so that I can push the needle back up. So I've made the same type of stitch, I just didn't have to pull all the way through and pull all the way back. So go down a little bit. I can kind of feel it with my back. I'm being very careful not to poke myself. And I'm coming back up. So going down and up. And bonus, you can do this more than once. So there I've got 2 stitches that I made. And I don't want to pull too tight. I'm not trying to make it ruffled like this. Don't pull too tight. And when you, eventually you're going to run out of yarn. And here's a tip. When the yarn, or the thread, when the thread is about the width of your thumb, or maybe 2 thumbs, you want to stop and make a knot because your thread is now too short for you to sew with. So be mindful that at some point you're going to maybe need to get more thread. So I'm going to go all the way around, and I'm going to stop at that point we talked about earlier so that I have an opening so we can get the stuffing in there. So I'm going to go all the way around. I'll see you back when I make this curve. Okay, so I got to the point where my thread was too short. It was about the size of my thumb, so I had to cut it. So I went through just 1 layer and I made a knot in here. And you'll see me make a knot at the end, but I just wanted to interrupt and show you what would happen. So I'm just going to make sure my 2 layers are lining up. Every once in a while you may have to zhuzh it, you may have to move it around a little or start to work from the other side even. That's fine. So I'm going to take my needle, I'm going to thread up again, and I'll see you when I get around to the end. Okay, I've gotten to the end of where I want to be in my stitching. Remember, I'm leaving an area open between the 2 layers. I'm leaving an area open between the 2 layers because we need to stuff it, right? And it's a lot easier to stuff if there's a place to stuff it. So we have like this little door here. I still have my thread attached because it's long enough. If it were too short, I'd make a knot, but it's long enough. And what's going to happen is I'm going to stuff this with our fluffy stuffing. And then I'm going to sew that area up like it never even happened. So take your floof that came in your kit, or if you didn't get a kit, you could use some old fabrics that you don't need. Ask before you rip anything up in your household. You could use shredded pieces of paper. You could use shredded pieces of plastic. So if you don't have any floof with you, that's fine. And grab your marker again. Make sure the cap is on. Grab your marker again because we're going to use it to sort of stuff the stuffing inside. Because my needle's attached, I just need to be careful and mindful that I still have this needle attached. If your needle's not attached, make sure you put it somewhere safe. We're going to need it again. So again, I suggested that we keep this area open right around here because then it's easier to get into the hook of our candy cane. So you're going to take some of your floof and you're going to stuffy into your pillow here. This is how pillows are made. You could make some square pillows, some rectangular pillows, triangular pillows, and I'm using my finger to push it down into the crook of the hook of the candy cane. So again, we chose this area for the opening because we wanted to be able to get in here and not have it be too hard for us. So stuffing my floof, taking a little bit at a time. And again, you could be using recycled fabric or recycled paper. And so now I'm putting some in, and I want it to go down this part of the candy cane. So I'm taking my marker, remember, make sure the cap is on, Also being careful because my needle is still attached and I am floofing to the bottom. A little bit at a time. Don't need to rush it. And if your fabric is unraveling a little bit, that's perfect. That's what we're going for. We want this to be sort of rustic and bohemian and very much handmade. It's very much supposed to look like you beautiful human, that you made it. It wasn't made by a machine. It was made by you beautiful human. Excellent. Keep going, keep going. You could also, if you had a little bit of lavender or peppermint oil, if someone in your house can help you with that, you could make this scented if you wanted. Be careful, this is not safe for pets. This is not safe for little kids. This is for people who know not to put these kinds of things in their mouths or near their eyeballs, right? Safety first, friends. Okay, so I have got just about as much floof, a little more floof. That's about enough floof. Okay, so we've got floof in the cane part. We've got floof down the long part. We can sort of massage it around a little. Oop, the floof was trying to come out. All right, so I've got my floof in there, and now I'm going to take my thread and my needle, and I'm going to continue sewing, trying to not get the floof in the way. Does that make sense? Trying to make sure the floof is out of the way, and I'm just getting the fabric. So I am going to stitch this up just like we were doing before, doing this stab stitch. And you know what? If some of the floof shows on the other side, we can probably cut that off later. Don't worry about it. I'm just going to sew along so that this is all closed up. And like I said, you may notice that if your stitches got a little bit too big, you could always go in and add more stitches. Or maybe you didn't catch both sides. You can always go back and add a few more stitches. And I specifically used a color that you could see. Again, I wanted to show that a human being made this, that human hands made this beautiful little ornament. All right, so just added, I think that's my last stitch. So now I need to make a knot. And it's very much like when we made the knot at the beginning. So I'm going to make a circle. I've looped my thread around, and I'm going to tuck my needle through the circle. I'm making a knot. So I've got it through the circle, and now I want to make sure that the knot goes down by the fabric. I don't want the knot up in the air, right? I want the knot near the fabric. So I'm just gonna carefully and slowly keep moving that knot down. And here's the tip, just like before. Put your needle next to the fabric inside the circle and slowly pull. And then bada bing, your knot is right next to the fabric, and give that a real nice tug. And then I often just do another little stitch just to hold it in place. And I can cut off my extra yarn, my extra thread. I keep calling it yarn, it's thread. And there we have our candy cane. You can pull out some of these threads to make it even more shredded looking. You could trim if you felt like there was an area that didn't look quite right. You could take your scissors and trim. The idea is to make it look sort of rusted and bohemian, kind of cool. This little bit's bugging me, so I'm just gonna snippity snip. Very nice. And I'm gonna do a little snippity snip right here. Give my candy cane a haircut. When was the last time you gave your candy cane a haircut? Okay, so now we want to have a way to hang it from a tree or from a knob on your kitchen cabinet. So what I'm gonna do is we're gonna take our thread just like from before. we're gonna put a knot in the end just like we did before. You're probably really good at this now. And if you're not, that's a joke, K-N-O-T, N-O-T. If you're not good at it just yet, don't worry, just keep practicing. So I've got a knot in my thread. I'm gonna cut off the little extra. I've got a knot in my thread, and let's see, I want it to hang right about here. So I am going to make a stitch, just pulled from the front to the back, and I'm gonna make a big loop about the size. So I'm stitching again. I went from the back to the front. And let's see, I want to keep about that much so that I can hang it on something. So all I have to do is stitch in place here a couple of times. And that is going to hold that in place so it doesn't move. I'm just stitching in place a couple of times so that the loop stays in right where I want it. You could also do this with ribbon. If you had some ribbon, you could sew some ribbon to the edge. All right, so I've got that. I'm gonna make a knot. I took my needle out. I'm gonna make a knot just like we did before. Just like we did before, but my needle is jumping. Come back, needle. Okay. I'm gonna hold my needle next to the fabric and slowly pull. And then I can snip that off. And there you have it. Your beautiful candy cane floofed stuffed ornament. It's fun. And so give it a little shake off. And you could always trim anything that you don't like, give it a little shake, and enjoy. Please remember, this isn't safe for pets, and it's not safe for little kids, right? We don't want anyone putting it in their mouth or near their eyeballs. I would love to see what you make. Let us know. Thanks for hanging out. Bye. Hope to see you in another class soon.